Ever feel like really getting away? Like truly off the grid? Well, picture this. An island getaway. But not just any island. This one's crawling with some of the most deadly snakes on the planet. We're diving into the story of Ilha da Caimana Grande, probably better known as Snake Island. And let me tell you, this isn't your average deserted island thriller, so where in the world are we, and what makes this place so different?
Imagine the Brazilian coast. Sun, surf, you got the picture. Now head about 20 miles out into the Atlantic. That's where you'll find Ilha da Caimana Grande. It's so packed with venomous snakes that humans basically steer clear.
20 miles out. So much for swimming to shore if you run out of snacks. And I'm guessing we're not talking about like your average garden snake here.
Not even close. We're talking about the golden lancehead viper. It's a species you won't find anywhere else on Earth. And here's where it gets really interesting. This island wasn't always an island. Thousands of years ago, rising sea levels cut it off from the mainland and trapped a bunch of these vipers. Isolated, with only migrating birds to eat their venom.
Well, let's just say it evolved to be incredibly potent.
Talk about adapting or dying, right? So we're talking venomous, not poisonous. Just, got to get my facts straight before I accidentally step on something.
Definitely venomous. We're not talking about a little love bite here.
Yeah.
Their venom is designed to take down prey fast, even if that prey happens to be flying a few hundred feet overhead. Okay, starting to get a vivid picture here. We've got this island, about the size of Vatican City, by the way, absolutely teeming with snakes whose venom packs 5 times the punch of their mainland counterparts. So what are we talking about? How does this venom actually work?
Well, this venom, it's what we call hemotoxic. Instead of just causing like pain and swelling around the bite, it goes after your blood.
Yeah.
Basically makes it clot improperly. Think internal bleeding, organ failure. It's not a pleasant way to go.
You're not sugarcoating it. And that's just from their mainland relatives, right? We'll get into what makes the island's golden lanceheads even more interesting a little later. But how many snakes are we even talking about here? I've heard some pretty wild numbers thrown around.
Yeah, there's this popular myth that there's a snake for every square meter of the island. It's an exaggeration, of course, but research still points to a population of around 4,000, which is a lot, considering how small the island actually is.
That's like playing a real-life game of Snake, but a lot less fun and a lot more deadly. Can you imagine just trying to walk around that place? Every step could be your last.
No kidding. And the island itself is kind of a character in this story, too. Rocky cliffs, thick forests, open grasslands. It's beautiful, but pretty unforgiving.
And totally off limits to people, right? I'm picturing a do not enter sign with like a sullen crossbones and maybe a coiled snake just for good measure.
You're not far off.
Yeah.
The Brazilian government's declared Ilha da Queimada Grande a protected area. The only human structure is an automated lighthouse that the Brazilian Navy checks on every so often.
So much for an impromptu camping trip. Let's say, hypothetically, someone did end up stranded there. What are their chances, really?
Honestly, without a quick rescue, slim to none.
Yeah.
Remember those cliffs and all that vegetation? Finding food and fresh water would be almost impossible.
Okay, so we've established this is definitely not on anyone's travel bucket list. But these snakes, I gotta admit, they're fascinating, even terrifying.
They're a testament to how powerful and resilient nature can be. And yeah, they've got that fearsome reputation, but they also have this incredible story of survival and adaptation, which we'll get into more after the break.
And we are back. You know, I gotta say, this island and these snakes, I'm kind of hooked on their story.
That's pretty wild.
Before the break, we were talking about how potent that venom is, even more so than its mainland relatives. Why is that?
So it's a really cool example of what we call island gigantism, or in this case, maybe venom gigantism is more accurate.
Makes sense. Everything's bigger on Snake Island, right?
Well, remember those migrating birds we talked about? Fast, agile. They don't exactly stay put for long.
Not exactly an easy target if you're a snake on the ground.
Exactly. The golden lanceheads on Ilha da Queimada Grande, they had to adapt. Over generations, their venom became super fast-acting, super potent, had to make sure they could take down prey with just one bite.
No time for second chances.
Nope. Survival of the fittest. Literally.
Wow. So lunch break is over pretty quickly on Snake Island.
You could say that.
This all makes me wonder, though. How do you even study something like that safely? I mean, I can't imagine getting up close and personal with one of these snakes is high on anyone's list.
Yeah, you're right to be cautious. Studying these snakes is not a walk in the park. It takes special training, protective gear, and a healthy amount of respect for what they're capable of.
For sure. But isn't there a way to study the venom without, actually having to wrangle a bunch of deadly snakes?
You're thinking about antivenom.
Yeah, exactly.
Because of how remote and dangerous the island is, very few research teams have actually studied the golden lancehead in its natural habitat. Most of the research comes from venom samples, carefully extracted, of course, from snakes that are kept in controlled environments on the mainland.
So it's like a maximum security prison for venomous snakes.
Yeah, something like that, but hopefully with less chance of a breakout.
I would hope so.
These controlled environments give scientists a safer way to study the venom's properties and explore possible applications.
Speaking of applications, this is where it gets really interesting, right? There's got to be some medical use for something this potent. What have they found?
You're totally right. Scientists believe there's huge potential in this venom to treat all sorts of conditions.
Like what? Don't hold out on me.
Well, remember how we were talking about its blood clotting properties? Researchers are looking into that, seeing if it could lead to new medications for heart conditions, regulating blood pressure, maybe even stroke treatment.
So something that could be deadly could actually end up saving lives. That's incredible.
It really shows you how nature works, doesn't it?
It does. But there's a catch, isn't there, this venom? It's valuable for more than just its medical uses.
You're right, unfortunately. Where there's something valuable, there's usually someone trying to take advantage.
You're talking about the illegal wildlife trade, aren't you?
Yeah. The golden lancehead's venom is rare. It has all this potential, which makes it a huge target. Poachers illegally capture these snakes and sell them on the black market, where the venom can be worth a lot.
It's awful. They're already vulnerable, and now they have to deal with this.
It just goes to show you that drive for profit can have huge consequences. In this case, it's the well-being of an entire species, plus the loss of all that potential scientific knowledge.
It's a race against time then, right? Scientists are trying to study it, poachers are trying to profit from it. How do you even begin to protect a species in this situation?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's one we'll dive into right after this quick break. Stay with us. We're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into Snake Island and those incredible golden lanceheads. Before the break, we were talking about the poachers, right? Driven by the very same venom that makes these snakes so fascinating. It's kind of a crazy situation. So how do you even begin to protect a species like that? You'd think being on an island, practically untouched, would be protection enough. Right. You'd think so. But it's kind of a catch-22, that isolation. Yeah. It makes it really hard to keep an eye on things and even harder to actually catch the poachers who are determined to get their hands on those snakes.
So it's like a game of chess almost. You've got to anticipate their next move.
Exactly. So first things first, you've got to ramp up patrols and surveillance around the island. The Brazilian Navy does a lot of that. They're like the first line of defense against anyone trying to land illegally.
It makes sense, but even if you catch them, the snakes.
The damage is already done. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's why awareness is huge. Getting people to understand, locally and globally how important these snakes are. If people get what's at stake, the ecological value, the fact that they could disappear completely, that can go a long way toward reducing the demand for the venom on the black market.
It's about changing attitudes almost.
It really is.
But what about the researchers, the people studying the venom? How do you find that balance? Being able to study something without putting it at even more risk.
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Scientists are working on ways to synthesize the venom's key components, like in a lab setting.
So you wouldn't need to rely on the wild populations as much.
Exactly. And of course, any research that does involve the golden lancehead, it has to be done super carefully, following strict guidelines to minimize any stress on the snakes.
So it's about respecting them at every step.
Absolutely.
This whole conversation has been eye-opening. We started with this island, almost mythical, a place people would go out of their way to avoid. And now I'm just, I don't know, kind of in awe of these creatures.
Deadly.
Deadly, yeah, but with so much potential.
They really make you think twice about, all the things we don't know,
Yeah,
all the ways nature can surprise us.
that's a great way to put it. A huge thank you to you for taking us on this journey to Snake Island. It's been amazing. And to all of you listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, curiosity is great, but it's always important to be aware of the bigger picture. Respect the world around us. Until next time, keep exploring.